Hi, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. I am an angel investor and have been for the last 25 years. I've invested in over 35 startups. During that time, I've met hundreds of entrepreneurs who taught me how to start companies from scratch and to grow them into valuable assets. I would ask you if you'd like to receive notices on these interviews is that you would sign up at paparelli.com, just submit your email, and as a bonus, you'll also get a Tuesday morning blog that I write each and every week. You know, we're here really to talk about how did you do it. We're talking to some pretty talented entrepreneurs who have built some amazing companies, and we learn from their stories. We learn from their backgrounds, but also mostly from their stories on how they developed themselves personally and how they built these companies, had came to the idea and built them into these great enterprises. My guest today is Blake Patton. Blake is the managing partner and founder of Tech Square Ventures. He is the founder of also Engage at Georgia Tech, which is, I call it, a later stage startup accelerator. He's the former general manager of the Advanced Technology Development Center. His springboard, I always kid him about this, his springboard in life is that he served as the captain of the Georgia Tech swim team. He went from Wallstreet to actually founding his own technology company. He later sold that company to a company called IXL, which became one of the now famous .com billion-dollar valued companies. And he was part of their famous C-suite. And the C-suite of those executives had tremendous impact over the last 2 decades in Atlanta technology and in technology throughout the United States. Most importantly, Blake is a dear friend of mine, and he is a well respected leader in the Atlanta technology community. And today's topic is how did you become a venture capitalist? So, welcome, Blake, and thanks for sharing with me and with others your entrepreneurial story.
Thanks for having me. It's
It's good.
always my pleasure to spend time with you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's no, we don't spend enough time together. That's how I feel. I miss our cigars on my deck.
I know
Yeah,
it's warm. It's warm again, so we'll have to
yeah.
do it again soon.
Well, you always come with such heavy topics. You know, I'm always a little intimidated. I always have to pray before you show up that God would give me enough wisdom to help you out. So, how long have you been a venture capitalist? Let's just start with that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with defining venture capitalist as investing other people's money as opposed to just investing. Um, and so since 2014,
2014. Has it been that long?
it has been that long.
It's amazing. I was always wondering when and we talked about this. I don't remember it though. Was this sort of a lifelong goal of yours?
It really wasn't. And boy, this is a long story. I think growing up, I didn't necessarily have, I don't think, a big ambitious goal. And I kind of got, started to think bigger when I was in college. And then, as you kind of pointed out in your introduction, I went and did what most people did out of school. I graduated in '93, went to work for a company called SEI, which is a publicly traded asset management company. So our office was literally right off Wall Street. Um, and that was right during the rise of the internet. And I just became fascinated with the internet and the potential. I said, hey, this is going to change how we work and live. I want to be part of it.
What year
And
was it?
a buddy of
What
mine
year
was
was
starting a company.
what year was this that you're talking about?
So that was kind of '93 to '95.
Okay.
And a buddy of mine from school, I was starting a company, or really he was doing some contract work that was continuing from his master's degree work in multimedia, and wanted to start a company around it. So I joined him, left my job and joined him. So I started down this technology and entrepreneurial path, not, I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs think today. I didn't have this kind of startup mentality. I didn't have we're going to go build a great big company and take over the world. I just, wanted to go do something that was more fun than what I was doing then, and hoped I could feed myself.
You said something a few minutes ago that really surprised me, but it fits with me knowing you for all of these years. You said, I didn't really, what'd you say? I didn't come out of college with any really great big ambitions. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I did. I came
Putting
out of
words in
college.
your mouth.
I
Maybe the
came out of
word that you
college
used
being
wasn't
ambitious.
ambition.
Yeah, I think I was ambitious, but I didn't have a plan. So I grew up in Jamestown, North Carolina. You know what today we would probably describe as kind of lower middle class. My dad was military, then he worked for the government after that. So I wasn't really surrounded by business. I was just good at math and science, and so I got a swimming scholarship to
When did
Georgia
you
Tech.
realize? When did you realize you were good at math and science? When did all that come up?
Um, I think a combination of looking at report cards and what I seemed to like, and doing my homework. The the interesting thing about growing up as a swimmer, so I started really competitively swimming when I was about 12, and by the time you're in high school, if you're kind of competitive at a state or national level, it's all consuming. You practice before school, after school, weekends are swim meets, and you're just so tired, and you're putting so much into that you actually become a remarkably good student because you get your work done, so that you have some semblance of a social life and you can go to sleep sometimes. So I was, I just kind of powered through it, and I didn't really have a big grand plan. And truthfully, swimming opened up my eyes the first time. And number one, because I was surrounded by a bunch of people on the team that were thinking about college. So I just instantly started thinking about college. That wasn't.
How did you become interested in swimming?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very odd. I don't talk to a lot of swimmers. You talk to guys, particularly, the friends that we know also in technology, a lot of baseball players, right? Don't seem to have a lot of football players, but there seem to be a lot of baseball players. And that's what I kind of saw. Baseball and football were the sports. Where did, you don't really talk to swimmers.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Why did that interest you?
So I had one of these sort of what I would call, extraordinary in the ordinary childhood, right? I grew up playing all these different sports. My parents carted me all around all the different sports. And in the summer leagues, I would swim. I enjoyed it. I was pretty good. And there was a swim team in town, a year-round swim team, and the coach kind of came to us at one of the meets and said, "Hey, you should come think about doing this." My mom found a few other kids that we knew that were part of it. So, carpool worked out. And next thing I knew, I was going to swim practice with this year-round swim club. And I just, I fell into it and loved it. I was pretty good at it. And it was much more than just a sport in swimming, though. It was those really became like your closest friends. And at some point, even
when I always wonder. So when, as a kid, I understand like in football and all that, how you look at the kid and you go like, oh man, he's really got the heart for it. Or in soccer, they got the speed, or they've got good eye, they got good football coordination or whatever it is. I mean, what do you do when you throw you in a pool and all of a sudden you just happen to be faster than everybody else? I mean, is that what happens?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit like startups. It's a combination of, first of all, the stopwatch is a pretty clear measure, right? However fast you swam. But I think it's more trajectory, right? They see how you're improving and say, wow, if he had more practice, more coaching, more help. So and truthfully, I think for these year-round swim teams, it wasn't all about saying they're trying to recruit a superstar. They're probably just trying to get the team big enough to keep the team afloat too, right? So anybody that might be interested in
middle school, this is a middle school team?
These are, back then it was called AAU. Today it's called USS Swimming. It's just an amateur year-round swim team. So here in Atlanta, it's teams like Dynamo, Swim Atlanta.
I know all that.
So there are these year-round swim clubs.
But do you have to give everything else up? I mean, you're saying, you're at that age, you're kind of playing a number of things,
Yeah, you don't
throw you in the pool and they say never come out. I mean, that would be difficult, I would think.
It doesn't happen overnight. It's you can go as far as you can capably, but also as much time as you want to invest. So as you get faster, right, you have to to compete with the other people at your level, you have to keep practicing at the next level. So it's kind of a decision each level. But you don't start out at age 12 doing those 2 practices a day. That's more high school. But it was a lot. And I look back now, especially as a parent with a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I am amazed that my parents managed to get me everywhere I needed to be. And especially, swim meets weren't just local, right? Swim meets were all over the East Coast. So weekends were consumed with that travel. And it's just amazing to me that my parents were able to pull that off.
Yeah, it's funny how when you become a parent, it all sort of puts things into perspective that you never really thought about, right? You
Oh
know,
yeah.
that's the great thing. Like you said, you're driving kids everywhere now. They're at that age. But what do
Yeah. So back to the ambition question. I think what happened was I went to, swimming, uh, you know, I, swimming was like a current, because of swimming, I started to think about college. I was pretty much limited to going somewhere where they would pay for it. Georgia Tech was one of the schools that offered a scholarship. I came to Atlanta, and if
you
you grow
must
up
have
in
been to get a D1 scholarship? You must have been pretty good.
I was certainly
What
I
was
was
your What was your race?
well, sprint freestyle and IM.
Okay.
And so one of the things that made me decent was I was good at a couple different events, never necessarily the superstar in one event. There was no danger of me going to the Olympics, but I was pretty good in a couple of events.
Oh, okay.
And so Georgia Tech, at the time, was one of the schools that offered a scholarship. And if you grow up in Jamestown and you come to Atlanta, Georgia, for a recruiting trip, you're coming here, right? I was too big.
Must have been this big.
Oh yeah, I was too big for Jamestown. I'm coming to Atlanta, and I thought at the time I wanted
to. Jamestown's in South Carolina, isn't it?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. So did any of the state schools try to recruit you?
NC State was another choice for me. I had about 4 different schools that I could have gone to.
Engineering schools?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to study engineering, and swimming's not like baseball or basketball or football. There is no, except for the very, very few that can go to the Olympics. That's it, right? This is, so swimming is a personal passion and something, if you can have it pay for college, it's amazing. But it's not like you're thinking about where can I go to become a pro, right? You just want to go somewhere that you can live up to the expectations of the scholarship.
But I read something recently, and then I'll get off this swimming thing, and I know I'm going on it too long. But I've always, having watched the Olympics here recently, looking at Ledecky, that girl and all this that won all these gold medals, I sit there and I read something recently where they were interviewing Dovacek, the tennis player, and they were talking about what motivates him. What keeps him on this thing like this? And he said, I just love hitting a tennis ball. And they said, well, doesn't everybody that's a tennis pro love hitting a tennis ball? And he goes, no, not everybody does, surprisingly. He says, but I do. And that's why I do it. So when I look at the decade,
for swimming,
is it true? I'm like, what is it with swimming? Because it is so. When I went to the University of Miami to relax, I would sit by the fence by the pool at the University of Miami and watch them just go back and forth. You guys practicing. It was so long and so boring, morning and at night. But it was relaxing for me to watch for an hour, and then I would go to class. So, what is it that draws you guys into this?
Yeah. So 2 things. First, a quick funny story. You're reminding me of my dad. One time I teased my dad about playing golf. And I said, you walk all over this course, you hit the ball, hit it in the hole, right? What a silly sport. And my dad said, he didn't use the word tail, but he said, you work your tail off for 2 hours and wind up right where you started.
That's what he said about you and swimming, right?
Yeah. So I think, and this will carry into my answer for the ambition part. I didn't know it then, but I was competitive. And so what's great about swimming is you have a really clear scorecard or scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
There is no doubt you either went faster than you've gone before, you either went faster than that person beside you, or you didn't. And so I think part of what kept me hooked on swimming was this cycle where, the input, you could see the results, and it was competitive. And, you were both racing other people, but you were also always constantly
instantaneous too.
Yeah, that's right. And you could see if you were getting better. And then again, swimming, and this was true all the way through college too. I can't I can't capture this adequately, but it became, it was my social group and my friends. And it's just, I think because you're all together and you're competing at that level and everybody's, putting everything into it, and you get to know each other, you're traveling together. These friendships just, I think that holds you to it as well, right? You get in and you just have this amazing group of people around you. that I look back now, and that was a super important part of it. I didn't understand that then, but that was a super important part of it. I was closer to those friends than I was even to friends at my whatever school I happened to be at the time.
So is that where, see, one thing that I've seen with you that I'm always amazed with you is the way that how well you maintain relationships. Did that happen through swimming, or is that true of all swimmers that were on your swim team, or do you find that that's just something that a skill that you just happen to have, or are you intentional about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think both. I think I am intentional about. Look, I think I just really, value those relationships, and some of it, like I said, is, I did not launch into college with a real understanding of what the world would look like after college, right? My parents didn't go to college, so I think I went in thinking, I need to do this.
The only one in your family that went to college?
No, well, my mom went to East Carolina for a couple of years, but and then my cousins went to college, and then my brother later went to college, but okay. Although he didn't finish, but he started college. But it wasn't a given, I guess is the best way to say it, right? My dad, the conversations were equally, get a job, join the Army, or go to college. But if you're going to go to college, then somebody's got to help you pay for it. So. It wasn't really just a given, but this group of friends I was with, it was a given. And then you started worrying about getting recruited. And it's just kind of like I said, it's a current took you there. But when I went to what I think I viewed college as this step I needed to do to be able to get a job. And so to me, it was just grades. Going into college, I just thought of it as grades 13, 14, 15, whatever. It was just what I needed to do to get a degree so I could get a job. And I landed at Georgia Tech. And it was really, this will get to the real answer to your question. At Georgia Tech, a bunch of things happened. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by all these incredible people, motivated, big dreams, big vision. And there was just this sense at Georgia Tech. Back then, Georgia Tech was a pretty tough interface, right? It wasn't, even today it is, but back then it was particularly known for just, weeding people out. And so I got there, and it was tough, especially my freshman year, but I was just kind of lit up with this sense that you could build anything. And, everything around engineering was about building things. And I was fascinated with it. And then I was really, really, really fortunate. Long story about how I got there, but I wound up meeting the president of the university, had a conversation that probably wasn't wise, but it turned out really well. At the time I was struggling, and I wasn't loving Georgia Tech. And I told him that. And he invited me to lunch. And I thought I was in trouble.
How did you meet the president of the university?
At an athletic event.
At a what?
And an athletic event,
okay.
A booster event. And he was a big fan of swimming, and he used to swim. So, he talked to us, and he asked me how I liked Georgia Tech, and I said, I don't. I'm thinking about leaving.
What year? Were you a freshman or a sophomore? What were you?
I was a freshman.
Oh my
not
gosh.
Not even one semester in.
Your father would have killed you.
Yeah. So he invited me to lunch, and we talked about it, and he kind of, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he said something along the lines of, you're, regardless of the poor delivery, right, your points are good. And by the way, we have this thing, back then it was called the National Advisory Board. Today they call it the Georgia Tech Advisory Board, but it's a board that basically serves as the president of the university's advisory board. And he said, listen, there's all these, incredible alumni, CEOs of companies, luminaries like Andrew Young are on this board, and we've never had students on it, and they're customers, and that's a mistake. So we're going to add 6 students to this board, and I'd like you to be one of them, but you have to promise me you'll stay. So I was smart enough to say yes, and I served on this president's advisory board. So here I am, 20 years old, surrounded by all these CEOs, these luminaries, and they were talking about Georgia Tech in the future. They were talking about Georgia Tech 25 years from then, and that was it. That was a pivotal moment for me. It's the first time I'd ever truly seen what leadership looked like at that kind of level. And
tell me what you were thinking then. Tell me tell me more about that. Unpack it a little bit. And that's pretty
good. Well, I mean, what I was thinking.
I'm surprised by him. What was your thought when he said, I'd like you to be part of these 6 students that we're going to put on this advisory board? What was your...
Well, I was relieved.
Did you know how cool it was to be with the president of the university as a freshman? I mean, did that even hit you?
Yeah, but this was before email and all this, right? So your invitation comes as a little note card in your mailbox. And then you call their secretary and you say, I'll be there. And then you worry about it for 3 weeks about what exactly you're showing up for. I did not know. So the truth is I showed up just nervous.
Respect for him.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
good. Okay.
I showed up nervous. But we talked about why I thought my freshman year was so difficult, what could be different and all that kind of stuff. And, I don't know what or why he saw that in me, or I'm sure some of it came from the Athletic Association activities, and they probably recommended people. By the way, the initial 6 students he chose, one of them was Annie Anton, who's now a really prominent professor, and she's back here. She was a dean for a little while at the College of Computing. One of them was Cedric Stallworth. He's a dean in the College of Computing and played football. And another was Nomar Garcia-Parra, the baseball player. So he actually was pretty incredible at spotting people that would, have impact and give back to Georgia Tech, which is incredible. Again, I guess that's why those folks.
So then let me ask this. This is something that, again, this is one of those things. I've known you for a long time, and I feel this way about you. Is you're not the guy that rushes to the front of the room, who really wants to be the center of attention. So now you're an adult. You're not a student. You're married. You got kids, right? You got your own. You've been through several businesses now. You've been around. What do you think that he saw in you now, as you look today? Now you back then you don't know anything, right? But now you have a little bit more perspective. What do you think he saw?
Yeah,
this little skinny Blake who was,
I wish I could answer it. I think what's great about being pretty good at something, but not that superstar, is that you really appreciate and respect, right, everything you have and the opportunity. And I think I've always loved the teams I was on. I've always really put myself into whatever team I was on. For some reason, I can't even identify this. Even when I was in high school and swimming, I got nominated to be the state representative to the sort of, association for the swimmers. And, when I came to Georgia Tech, I got different opportunities. So somehow,
he wasn't the only one that recognized something in you.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I think we can talk about this more later. But the other thing is, people that have stepped up to be mentors in my life somehow have also they've become really good friends. And I've always asked myself how that is, because I watched some other mentoring relationships, but so there's something there. But number one, I think it was in the beginning. Now, later in my life, I recognize that as just this need actually to serve. And so I couldn't have articulated that then. But I think I've always been that way on all the teams. I've tried to kind of be that, big supporter of people around me. And beyond that, I can't answer the question. I don't know, but it has happened to me multiple times. But this was, I showed up to that first. You said, what was I thinking? I showed up to the first advisory board meeting. I knew enough to know this was a big deal and it was impressive. But I showed up so nervous. I was walking across campus to go to it, and one of my teammates ran into me, and I told him where I was going, and he looked at me and said, "Not dressed like that, you're not." And took me to his dorm room. His name's David Cadelli. He's about, I don't know, easily 3-4 inches taller than me, if not, half a foot. He's a very tall guy. And so he gave me some clothes that I'm not sure I looked better. The clothes showed the proper level of respect, but I must have looked like a clown. And, showed up at this meeting. And like I said, it was almost instantaneous. I just saw these people, and it was incredible to me when they would turn around and ask you what you thought. Right. And it was fun.
You're talking
right?
People like Andrew Young.
Right.
Right.
And
that's crazy.
And they were doing this master plan. And then, during this time, obviously Georgia Tech had decided to be part of the bid was for the Olympics. So there's just all these fascinating things going on. You couldn't help but get pulled into it. It was just so much fun, so much opportunity. But that was really that was what lit my ambition fuse, right? I said, okay, I get it now, right? I get what leadership looks like. I want to be one of those leaders. I didn't totally know how I wanted to apply it. I knew I wanted to still be an engineer.
But look at that. Look what you did. I mean, when you were even in high school, by being on that swim team, okay, which was not with the swim team, then you're surrounded by people who their ambition is, well, we want to get scholarships, we want to go to college. Now, that wasn't true of everybody in Jamestown High School. right?
No.
And then so that's your first set of influencers that you're hanging around. Then you go to Georgia Tech, and now you're hanging around with these students, and it's amazing to me that this president points to you and says, "Well, what's your experience like at Georgia Tech?" You said, "I don't like it." And then, but he saw something, and you weren't the captain at the time. You were just a freshman on the team, and he gets you there, and now you're sitting around with the leaders, basically, of the entire Atlanta community.
Yeah.
This is it.
And I can't, to this day, I can't answer it. And I've got
Well, what a
5 or
gift to
6
be
of those
moved
moments.
along like that. You know, that's something that you can't say, all right, here's what I'm going to do, right? You just happen to get pulled into things.
Right. And I don't know how to identify it. I can give you 5 or 6 more examples, but yeah. And then once I was there, so as graduation came,
Tell me a little bit
1993.
more about this. You made a comment about them looking out 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, tell me about the impact that these people, these leaders, had on you.
Yeah.
At
So
that
I can
time, 20 years old. What was that like?
well, a couple. The biggest impact was that they were thinking about where they wanted to go or where it should go, and that it was okay to not know the answers, but that it kind of taught me that they were thinking in terms of bets. You know, they were thinking in terms of where to apply energy and resources, in hopes that it was going to pay off in the future. And I think that gave me a head start on what it meant, you know, to make tough decisions. But so back then around the Olympics, you know, if you think of all the vision that went into that they talked about needing to develop areas, what's now Tech Square. They didn't obviously call it that, and they couldn't have described what we see today, but they talked about needing to create an area on the edge of campus that would be where industry and Georgia Tech came together. So they were doing these campus master plans and all these themes, you know, that they talked about. You know, I can see now, 30 years later, what that looks like. And but at the time, it was just fascinating to me that it was just new information to me that people were thinking about where Georgia Tech would be, you know, in 10 to 25 years, right? I was still trying to figure out.
What's also interesting to me, having come from the same kind of background as you. In other words, I didn't sit at a dinner table with a dad that was talking about business.
Right.
Right. So I didn't know. So when you say we're going to put, when these guys are saying we're going to go to the edge of campus, and this is where Georgia Tech as an academic institution, the industry are going to meet. I don't think I would have even understood how that's such a big idea, and I was so unprepared for it. How did you?
Yeah.
Did you take it in? Did you get it?
I did get it. And I think that's because I was in. So I think of all the things we talked about, I kept gravitating towards these things that were about the plans. And I think as an engineer, both the project planning and then everything, because a lot of it has to do with discussions around facilities, right? And so I could understand that, you know, resources, a building, we need this. If we could get the Olympics, that would bring a bunch of money. It would help us transform the campus. You know, those were concepts I could understand. And it just taught me that it was okay to say these outrageous, audacious goals and work backwards from them, right? You know, there was nothing, you know, reasonable about some of the things that, you know, the ambition they were talking about. And
I like where you made the comment you said when they're thinking 25 years out, and this is something I learned from it, is we could think broadly like that or think long term, and we didn't have to be right.
That's right.
But so we didn't have to be practical about it. We just had to sort of have bigger and bigger ideas and see where it might take us.
Yeah. And then I think I understood that. I think when I was surrounded by them, something I definitely figured out early was because on Georgia Tech's campus, any college, right, you're already surrounded by people talking about big ideas. But these people would talk about big ideas, and they would translate that into some set of actions and some set of, you know, I don't know a better word, but it's almost, you know, they were taking bets. They were deciding which things to pursue and which things not to pursue in hopes that something, you know, would come about. And that was.
How did they come to an agreement on what bets to pursue? Do you remember that?
Well, certainly the first time I'd been
consensus with all these smart guys in the room. That's what I mean. We've been in rooms full of really smart people. And a lot of times the room of really smart people just want to just keep proving that they're really smart individually.
Yeah, for the most part, two things. Certainly the first time I'd been introduced to Robert's Rules of Order, but they operated in committees. And at the end, it was just feedback and recommendation, right? At the end of the day, you know, the university still had to make the decision. But then what I also saw, the second part of what I was going to say I learned was that board wasn't just giving advice. Those also happened to be the people that the university needed to turn back around to and say, okay, I need your help making this happen, right? I need you to write a check. I need you to, do this or that in industry. I need you to help make this connection. And so I saw, I just saw that it was a good introduction to how the world worked that I had never seen growing up. And I didn't necessarily process it all then, but I knew I was lucky, and it was just fun. It was really fun. And I got to be part of the Olympic planning. I got a summer internship working on that. And it was, it was like getting to put project plans against dreams. And it was just a big transformation for me. And so I think when I graduated, I definitely was back to.
How did you come out of that experience? How did it change Blake Patton, from the Jamestown kid that was, swimming at 12 years old to, here you are. You're not going to be an Olympic swimmer, but you're different. How are you different?
Yeah. I think, a couple things. And none of this I could have articulated. Number one, it put me completely at ease of people that, I probably otherwise would have been intimidated around.
Yeah.
And people that were, smarter than me, right? You didn't have to be the smartest at anything. You had to work with the best teams. Number two, it taught me that longer term planning, right? You got to take an extra second to aim. And then number three, I think it just gave me this sense that I could, even though I still didn't know what I wanted to do, it gave me this sense that I could do whatever I wanted to do. It was just kind of freeing, and in fact, while I was doing that, I changed majors 2 or 3 times. I couldn't figure out what major I wanted to do. Wound up settling in industrial engineering because I liked programming and processes. And then, when I went to graduate, there was a little bit of a reality check. Turns out you can't necessarily right away go do everything you want to do. And it was, back 93 wasn't a particularly strong, it was coming out of a tough time in the economy. So your world suddenly shrunk down to what doors you could manage to open.
When my son, it's funny when my son graduated. This is David when he graduated from the University of Miami. He says, they gave us a test, Dad, on what we're best qualified to be, and what we should be looking for. And I said, so what did they have for you? I mean, what happened? What were the results of the test? He says, well, they said I should be a CEO. And he said, I don't think there's a lot of opportunities for that coming right out of school.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. So here you are, all these big ideas, all these great leaders, all this. And then it comes down to, okay, man, you got to find a job. That got pretty small pretty quick, right?
It got small quick. I don't remember the whole process. There wasn't all this, internet and everything. So even just finding jobs and applying was a lot of work. And
yeah, but with all these people that you knew, I mean, you're sitting there with the leaders of Atlanta. Didn't every single one of them sort of give you an opportunity, give you some offer?
Not every one of them, but that is where all my offers came from. And I wound up accepting the job with SEI. So in 93, if you were an engineer, the big topic was process engineering, dimming, right? And so everybody wanted to re-engineer their processes. And so here was this financial services firm, which I didn't think of.
Was that a dimming concept?
Yeah.
It was?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't, my other offers were with like Interface, the carpet company, another one that was like they were the leaders in making like the, whatever you call the car transport carriers. And it was real design type work. But this SEI, Al West, because I knew him from this advisory board, and he said, listen, here, you like programming, and this is, what we do, and you should come work here. And he talked about why financial services was a good place to be in the re-engineering. And so I can't say that I have a ton of insight into what made me choose it, but I chose it and packed up the truck and first moved up to Philadelphia, then to Manhattan, then to New York. And, so I started out down that path.
Did you choose it? Did the person doing the interviewing or the person hiring you, was that a big element into, did it play strong as to who you were really choosing to go with? You say you didn't really know why. There was something that sort of leaned you in that direction for sure.
There were two. Well, it was definitely it was definitely that Al West, the founder and CEO, took the time to sit me down and say, like, he knew who I was, and that if I came there, it would be a good move for me. He didn't just get me a connection and say, hey, I'll see if I can get you a job. He really kind of tried to talk me into it. And then for sure, the recruiting process, in fact, I still get to work with her some today, small world. She's at Georgia Power now. Another tech grad that was a couple years ahead of me was on the recruiting group there, Rita Breen. And she talked to me about how much she loved it and was able to kind of talk about it in Georgia Tech terms. And then I think I was also just, I loved that this financial services firm had historically not recruited from somewhere like Georgia Tech. It was a financial service firm, so it recruited from, the Penns and the Harvards and all that. And so I don't know, I think there was a little bit of that challenge part of it too. And honestly, it sounded exciting to pick up and go live in a part of the country I'd never lived in. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go do this. And
you said it was Philly or it was New York?
I first moved to Philly, but I was only there about a year. Then it was New York.
Okay.
And, and I got there and I was a little bit of a fish out of water in terms of it turned out, I loved the programming. I loved the planning. I wasn't passionate about the asset management business, which SEI had historically been the largest back office trust accounting system provider, and it was moving towards this, what's now a large asset management company. I just wasn't as passionate about it as everyone around me. But I was excited about the internet, and it was a great place to understand how the internet was changing everything, because you go home and play with it, and you could contrast that to the Bloomberg terminal and see how freeing this was going to be, how much it was going to change access to information. And I just that's just what I wanted to do.
Do you remember when you first saw the internet? Because you were in New York at the time, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you call the internet. I certainly knew what it was in college, and we had these. Oh,
you did deal with DARPA, I guess, or whatever it's.
Yeah, and we were learning things like hypertext and It was more talked about as multimedia. It was part of multimedia.
I see. Okay.
But I was aware of it, but it wasn't yet a broad tool. It was a big deal, to have it wasn't a given that you would have a computer and an email account, right? It was sort of like that was kind of the transition there, and so right when I got to school, in fact, got to SEI. In fact, when you needed to do work at home, these laptops like we carry today, right? We called them lugabouts, but they literally were a briefcase with a handle, right? So you would have to check this thing out and take it home, and it was this huge.
Yeah, they would.
Heavy
that was
thing.
Like the compacts and all that. They were like 22 pounds, I think, is what they were.
Right. So I just graduated at the perfect time, right? Just went from that to everybody has a PC, just like within those couple of years of when I graduated, and so. It didn't matter that it wasn't exactly what we had studied in college. No one else knew anything about it either. And so you could jump in and know as much as everybody else. And so it wasn't a big knowledge leap. And we were kind of doing it.
Why did you make the leap? And these other guys that you were working with, was part of it your dissatisfaction with what you were doing? But there was other guys that just stayed at SEI, or they moved to another Wallstreet asset management firm.
Yeah, look, I think if I had grown up with a business background, I wouldn't have made the leap. I think I didn't even know how lucky I was to be where I was.
I love that.
And
so
SEI was.
It's good to know what you don't know, right? Or not to know what you don't know, right? Yeah.
And it was SEI was so ahead of its time. It was such a great company. They moved people around. They gave people chances. It was open office environment before that was a word, and it was just. The CEO was just fantastic. Everything about the company was great. I just wasn't excited to be moving money around. Mm-hmm. It just didn't light me up. The programming part of it lit me up, but the capital markets part didn't. And so again, I don't know that I overthought it. I thought, if I jump out and do this, I sure hope I can feed myself, and I sure hope I can pay myself, but this will be a lot more fun. And so, I really was running towards something, not away from something. SEI gave me, in fact, kind of like the Georgia Tech opportunity. During my first year, they put together this team to do a planning exercise for the future of SEI. And they sort of plucked me out as the guy who didn't know anything, to ask all the dumb questions, and put me on on that task force, right? So that was another opportunity that I, who knows how these things keep happening, but I was running to the internet. I wasn't running away from SEI. I just wanted to be part of that.
How many people are on that team? You said I just got plucked because I was the guy that didn't know anything.
Yeah.
How many people were on that team?
I don't remember exactly, but it was less than 10. It was probably
Were you the youngest on the team?
Oh yeah, by far.
What do they keep seeing in you? That's incredible. And for you not to know what it is.
I don't know.
It's like God goes ahead of you and puts favor, in these people's hearts for you for some reason. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I don't know if this is it, but I think there's two things that I think when I'm in groups that I kind of wind up being the person that does. And that's, so one, I think I figure out the questions that matter. And two is I think I am decent at simplifying complex things. And so that might be part of it, is that might have all added up to what I'm sure was terrible communication, but ahead of, maybe a little bit ahead of what you would expect at that age. But I think that's probably why I was able to articulate what I was thinking.
Those are two really great gifts. To know what the right questions are to ask and to be able to simplify the complexity. Those you want to be around people like that. So that would make sense. I give you that.
And later in my life, I would.
Well, what did you do this? What happened with this? When you talked about this lady later went to Georgia Power and all this, and and I still know her. It's just amazing to me again. When you look at your SCI guys, now that's 25 years ago, right? Are you still you can still call those people up and you're still sort of in touch and on their minds from time to time?
Well, I don't know if so my peer group, when you're in the financial services, you're kind of the people like 1 or 2 years behind you and 1 or 2 years ahead of you. You're kind of like a cohort. So the people in my cohort, yes, absolutely. There's a handful that I'm still keep up with, and friends and all that, for sure.
How you do that, I'd love to talk to you for 2 hours on how you do that period. I mean, I just think that is just absolutely.
This is jumping ahead, and we'll get to this at some point in the conversation. But a little bit of preview of, I don't know the answer to how I do it or whatever, but I couldn't have said this then, but and Charlie, you and I have talked about this later, but I do look back at all these things that didn't make sense and didn't seem to be leading to anything specific, and then realize, there was, I kind of right off the part that I don't know to saying, God's plan, right? These were all steps that added up to where I'm at now. And so I'm actually okay not knowing and nailing down specifically what some of those things are. I think some of it was, if I'd gone too far off course, I somehow would have wound up back in the same place. But, I was blessed that I kept meeting these mentors that took an interest in me and would spend time with me. And I genuinely think that every stop along the way, in fact, I think I did the worst of this at SEI, by the way, because I didn't really understand it. But I pretty quickly learned to feel a really heavy sense of obligation to deliver on the things that, these opportunities or things I've signed up for. And that might be part of what people sense as well, that, he's going to go after this and keep swinging until he figures it out. But yeah, I guess it's all that, but honestly, I think a lot of it isn't necessarily a formula, or, I'm not saying that there's not a lot that I do right, but some of it, I was just blessed that I met the people I did when I met them.
And I'm sure that cohort that you're talking about too, that you were a part of at SEI, they all turned out to be pretty big leaders too, I would guess.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. I'll, without going linearly through it, I'll fast forward a little bit and double click on that. So when we were at IXL, IXL bought our company and bought 30 other companies. And so we had this joke, we called ourselves the Ex-President's Club. And there was this sense, there was this big giant pool of type A personality entrepreneurs trying to come together and build a company that was growing amazingly quick. And we we became friends. And so to this day, there's a group of us that every year we get together and take a trip somewhere and just catch up on life, talk about how we can help each other, all of that. And if you think about the fact that
this is the ex-president's club.
Well, we call ourselves a rat pack, but it was a bunch of people that were at IXL at the time, not a bunch, but about a dozen of us. And, when we first started hanging out, I mean, we were all clearly entrepreneurial and we were doing well, and IXL was doing well. But when we first started hanging out, there was nothing to sort of indicate that this group of people had gone to do, what they've done. And so this group that we continue to take these trips with, we've had, one of them founded and is CEO of a publicly traded company and literally a billionaire now. One of them went on to be a congressman. A couple of them have built and sold and exited and sold companies. One's a general counsel of a company. Bill Nussey here in town. His accomplishments. So this group, in fact, I'm probably the least successful person in that group, but this group went on to do amazing things.
You're clearly the most liked. That's what's most important.
Yeah. But what's amazing is now we're at the stage in our life where, members of that group get cancer. Members of those group have challenges with their, in their lives. And so this group has been like a board and like a best friend group. And it's incredible because we've been with each other every step. And we take this intentional time every year to get together and catch up. And it's just amazing how connected it's kept us. And that's the group that, you pick up the phone first, when you have hard things in your life. And so again, back to your point about it. So Bert Ellis deserves an unbelievable amount of credit for just the quality of people.
Bert, just for others, is the founder of IXL.
Yeah, he was the founder of IXL. And,
right.
He just, the people he brought together it was such a chaotic, some people would see it chaotic, others would entrepreneurial, but it was such a chaotic / entrepreneurial environment. He would just give you so much room and freedom to build. And it was just a really cool environment. And I think he not only was amazing at, he's a great salesman, but selling all these great people to coming together. But he gave us just this platform, that we felt like we were changing the world, right? We would talk about it literally like that. The internet's changing the world. We're building this. We are changing the world. And it was just an incredible ride. And the people he brought together so he deserves an amazing amount of credit. I've never seen another organization pull together that many amazing people. He just did an amazing job pulling together such an incredible group.
It is. I mean, the people that are part of that, what you call rat pack, that's just amazing to me, the accomplishments that the impact that they've had on our society and our community here in Atlanta and beyond. Who came up with this? It's almost like you had your own little YPO group, young. What's YPO is young.
Yeah, young professional organization. Yep.
Right. It's like your own YPO and how important that is. So you got your own group. Who came up with this idea that we should get together on an annual basis? And then who sustains it? Who leads that?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen on its own. It's not like everybody just on one day.
The coming together was organic. It was originally a group, and I didn't go on the first trip. That wasn't thought of like that. It was, remember, we all suddenly thought we were incredibly wealthy, right? And we were on paper after we went public, right? So we started
taking the valuation of IXL at its height.
About $2 billion.
$2 billion. And this is 1998, 99?
99 to 2, but we went, that was probably like awesome time. Yeah, right before. Yeah, it went down quick after that.
What was your net worth based on that $2 billion valuation? I know you remember.
I don't remember what it was at its peak. And I don't really want to volunteer what it was when we look at it. Let me put it to you this way. I was floored with, so even after everybody was lamenting after it crashed, I was amazed that anybody would give me that much. This was more money than I could have ever thought of or dreamed of. So I did, I recognized that I was really fortunate, compared to my peers and everything else. But yeah, it was considerably smaller than what it was at the 2 billion point.
Well, that's what I mean. That's why I'm not asking you what it ultimately was, but at 2 billion, I remember. So back that time, everybody was a cent millionaire.
Yeah, it was probably 8 times as much as I ultimately got to see and put in the bank account. But you know, the second part of you know what you said with that YPO group and everything, that when we first started, I wasn't on the first trip, and they didn't think of it as starting what it would become. But they went on a trip and they just had a bunch of fun, and then it was, hey, we should do that again, and we should invite these people. We should do that again. We should invite these people, and then pretty soon. And what is fascinating is, it's a great question, who keeps it going. So we usually, we all kind of talk about it all year, right? Talk about where are we going to go this year? What are we going to do, kind of through email chains. And there is usually somebody who kind of steps up. It's different every year. One guy, Mike Hetwer, I would say deserves most of the credit. He's, if no one's putting it together, he jumps in and
there you go. Okay, good.
Whips it in shape. But it's kind of an email. It emerges each year through an email thread. Sometimes we would think in terms of like a trip that was going to be meaningful or whatever. And other times it was based around things like this year. Unfortunately, we have one member of the group that has cancer, and we're planning the whole thing around, how can we be where he is? So it's been pretty ad hoc, but the group is super connected.
And this is 20 years.
Yeah.
Staying together.
That's right.
These are guys who are in their late 20s that now are in their late 40s, by and large. I mean, as an average age.
Some of them are in their 60s, yeah.
Some are in their 60s, you say? Oh, are they? Okay.
Yep.
Is Bert go on this trip?
So Bert doesn't go on this trip. This I think because of the way it emerged, like I said, it was, he was the adult and we were the 20-somethings going to South Beach, Miami, and having too much fun.
So how did you wound up coming out of this business that you started? You get bought by IXL. You come out of how did the whole IXL thing end for you?
Yeah.
What role did you play at IXL, by the way? I don't know that I ever knew that.
Yeah. What role did I not play? So when they first acquired us, we were different than all the other companies because we were in Atlanta, and so they didn't need another Atlanta office. So everyone else that got acquired, they went on to kind of keep doing what they were doing, but in their geography. So I wound up getting sent to run our Boston office because we were acquiring a couple companies and putting them into one office up there, and that was a pretty visible market for us. It was where some of the big competitors for what we do were. So I started there, and then I wound up. We were trying to launch some product. Ixl had a ventures group, and so we had this idea for a product, and we created a product, and I launched that. We sold it, so we created that as a separate company. It was called SiteMan. And then anyway, long story short, I wound up, after we went public, we divided, like most American companies, we said, okay, here's what the world looks like: Eastern U.S., Western U.S., and the rest of the world. And so I got put in charge of international, I think only because when I was working for SEI, I had traveled internationally. I don't think I had any other qualifications other than
I'd been grew up in Jamestown, so I mean that gave you international experience.
And so we went on the spree of acquiring companies, and I led all of our business outside the U.S. And that's what I did all the way till the .com crash. And when the .com crash happened,
were you doing acquisitions yourself? Were you leading those teams?
Well, we had an M&A team, but it was sort of my region, so we had to identify them, work with the M&A team, and then integrate them. But we did have an M&A team. Jim Rocco gets most of the credit for our acquisitions, and Joelle Fox, who's now at Tech Square Ventures, she was part of that team too. Anyway, fast forward, .com crash. I was insulated from how bad it was because I was already in Europe, and it really didn't happen the same way it happened in the U.S. because Europe was a little bit behind the curve. So our revenue was real, our customers were real, and so it was tough, but it wasn't this giant crash. And as it became clear to what a big deal this was to the overall company, publicly traded company. I remember we had a meeting where they gave us all red baseball bats, and they showed us a clip from I think it was godfather, right? But the point was, if you don't perform, we're going to hit you with this bat. It's great that you built this company to the stage, but like this is a real company and publicly traded company. But anyway, so more and more, the company was bringing in professional managers. And when the dot-com crash hit, I actually wound up deciding I was going to leave. I was obligated to stay for a while. And so my job actually became helping them consolidate, which meant sell off some of the assets and kind of re-engineer things. At the time, I thought I was being punished, but that turned out to be an amazing experience for what I do now. So I spent a little bit of time helping right size, I guess is the politically correct term for what was happening.
How did that experience help you? Talk about that just for a second. For what you're doing now, what did you learn then?
I had to find people to acquire things that weren't perfect. I got to see a lot of people that I loved and care about, that we had to let go. And I would go into these markets and I would try to find places for them to land and make partnerships. I communicated. I learned quickly when I was communicating badly in the situation of crisis. I got instant, very negative feedback when I screwed up. It was, when you're, by this point, you're an officer of a publicly traded company. I'm 29 or 30 years old. I was completely in over my head. But all these lessons turned out to be super helpful in not just managing a company going straight up into the right. But having to recognize, face, make hard decisions, and then to appreciate the consequences of not just sitting in a room and making those decisions, but what happens to real people when you go out and start pulling those triggers. But anyway, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I still owned a house in Atlanta. So I came back to the U.S. and got the renters out of my house and came to Atlanta. Where were you, in London at the time? Yeah, I was based in London.
What an amazing experience to have. And you were running all over Western Europe?
Yeah, primarily Western Europe. We had an office in Tokyo. We had an office in Brazil.
Were you married at the time?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was not. Not only was I not married.
A little easier, I would think.
Not only was I not married, but every time I knew it wasn't sustainable, because every time I came back to the U.S. and saw my friends, every one of them said, "You look terrible."
Oh.
And I recognized
29 when they're saying this to you.
Yeah, and the travel was just off the charts, and it was crazy going up, and then it was we never got the calm period. It was
stress in both directions. It's tremendous stress.
Different stresses in both directions.
Yeah.
Now that said, I loved it and learned a ton. Building these companies in other countries, we learned all kinds of things. But after Ixl came back to the U.S. And I don't remember exactly how all it triangulated, but one of my neighbors.
What was your life like with being single at that time, but being busy constantly? I mean, that's when you're like that, it's basically a 24/7 job. I mean, you're not thinking about anything else. The only free time you have is if you have a happy hour with the people at the office. Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot going on.
I'm not sure I want to be on record for the total honest answer on that. I'll tell you more about that when we sit on your porch next time. But it was good. It was fun because we had we had money, and it was exciting, and so you were challenged. I was definitely going too fast and too hard. And if I knew what I knew now, I would have, said this is crazy, right? But
you're surrounded by all the same people, all the people doing all the same things, right? So it was normal.
And think about what our customers were doing. Our customers were launching everything that we just take for granted now, right? We were putting everybody online for the first time. We were coming up with all these new ideas, of what could be done on the internet. Like today, it's obvious, but sitting around with clients talking about how are they going to sell their products online? How are we going to do this or that? It was just such a, it was sort of this gold rush, unique point in history. So it was a lot of fun.
To put it into perspective a little bit, our late friend Kevin Foster, he was working at IXL with you guys, very talented guy too, and he said he was up in Detroit because he was the problem solver guy. If there was an account that was upside down, he would be the guy to go in and try to save the day. And he says, I'm sitting there And the guy it was Ford, I think, or something like that. And they said to me, the guy says to me, CIO, he says, the shopping cart just isn't working right. And Kevin said, I said to myself, I don't even know what a shopping cart is.
Yeah, it was. I
That's
mean,
how early on it was. I just want to put it in perspective for the listeners, I mean, it was crazy.
oh yeah, and it wasn't just everybody thinks back and they'll hear, oh, you guys charged $1 million or $2 million to build a website. That's just nuts. But what's hard to explain to people is we didn't charge $1 million to build the website. You had to figure out, whatever they were going to sell in that shopping cart. I had a large client that's a shoe manufacturer, and everybody wanted to talk about building the cart and building the website and what they were going to sell. But you had to pause and say, have you ever shipped one pair of shoes to anybody, right? Like how are we going to do this, right? And so you had to figure out everything. And there weren't all these coding frameworks, so all the work was hard. There weren't all the tools there are today. But it was just amazing. It was amazing to be experimenting. We at Ixl, we had a multimedia group. I remember we were experimenting with what's now just totally normal, but like some of the first streaming stuff we did was trying to put, worldwide wrestling, on the internet, right? Can you, at dial-up speeds, right? But so it was just fascinating what we got to do and the companies we got to do it with.
And how old was your president?
Well, so Bill Nussey was a president, and he was only a couple years older than me. In fact, when he got to Ixl, we met, and he asked me. He looked at me and he said, "How is it?" And he was joking with me, right? And he said, "How is it that a high school kid can run, one of the largest parts one of the most profitable parts of the company?" And I looked at him back straight away and said, "How is it that you let a college kid run the whole damn thing?" and we've been great friends ever since. But yeah, Bill was at Greylock. Bill was one of our investors. And I think Bert got tired of him telling him what he was doing wrong and said, "Why don't you come do it?" And so Bill.
Well, he was one. By the way, I did an interview with him, and he told this story, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. So to this day, Bill's one of my best friends. And
he kind of felt about Greylock, I think, in his experience here, as you did about SCI. It was like, that's not quite where I needed to be. It just needed to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I know exactly. But yeah, so that was the Ixl, and then
So how did you eventually just leave? How did you go away? And how many years were you there, by the way?
Yeah, how many years was it there? About 5.
5 years, yeah. Felt like 50.
When I remember, when I decided it was time to leave, I had a couple of insights. One was it was getting tough because of the .com days, and I thought of it as a little bigger than that. I said, being a publicly traded professional services firm really sucks. And what I realized was exhausting was having to find, when you run a P&L, was having to find your revenue every quarter. And I just said, I knew I didn't want to keep doing that. And I was just ready for something different. It was no longer about changing the world. It was about, building and then saving the company. And it just, as you went, and then as they started bringing in these professional managers from bigger companies and bigger consulting firms, I just didn't have the same. It just wasn't the same. And when I decided, there was a period before we left when we were restructuring that I wound up, we had to create a new title for it, but I wound up also managing all of the basically G&A operations for the company worldwide. And I remember when they came to me, that was actually a big light bulb. When they offered it to me, they called it enterprise services. And I said, well, actually, I think I'm better running this international. And they said, oh, no, not you're going to keep doing that too. And I think that was probably my first clue that, we may not have it all. We may not have our act together. If I'm the best choice for that, and I'm going to do both those things together, this might be a tough time. And so just all that together, I decided I was going to move on. And I didn't, like I said, I felt a big obligation to the team. And frankly, we had terms from when we got bought that we had to give certain notice. So anyway, there was a sort of a year transition between saying I'm leaving and when I actually left. But by the time I left, I didn't know what I was going to do, and that was okay, right?
So this is a little bit different. You were actually running from something, leaving something, not running to something.
Yeah, I was proud of what we built, but I knew it wasn't going to be the
No, but it's
same.
just I'm not saying that. I'm not criticizing you. This is
Yeah.
this is something different,
Yeah. It
right?
was time to do something
There is
different.
the running to something thing, right? Which you
Yeah.
did with the internet, and that
No,
got
that's
you the
fair.
company
I
where
was
you are.
running away. I was running away from something, and I thought of myself as an operator at that point. And I think all the people at IXL would have also described me that way. It
Yeah,
was,
well, clearly
I
you
didn't think of
were.
myself. Yeah, I didn't think of myself as the visionary. I thought of myself as people would say, you know, more like hey, we need to take that hill, and I was the lieutenant that said, go take that hill. So I was leaving IXL with this sense that I could build things really well, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with that.
What was it like? Tell me a little bit about this time in your life where you
Yeah.
come back, you get the renters out of your house, you move into your house, you're
Mm-hmm.
single, and you're unemployed. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're sitting
And
there,
I
you
played a
just
lot of
came
golf.
off being this big. You were Mr. Big, right? Running all of international. And now you're Blake Patton from Jamestown. You know, I mean,
Oh
like,
yeah.
what's the deal?
No, and by the way,
What was that like?
on the way down, we were massively criticized. You took a public beating, on the
I
tail end of
remember
that.
those days. Yeah.
Yeah, I was exhausted. And anyway, I should say, I played a lot of golf with Kevin Foster. So Kevin Foster and I,
Oh, really? Okay.
it was actually the only period in my life where I consistently played golf. And Kevin and I went through detox together playing golf.
Did you have as
But
pretty a swing as Kevin did?
no, definitely not. Definitely not.
Okay. He was pretty
Uh,
smooth.
he was pretty smooth, but those were great times. And so look, the question you've asked, and I know these parts of my story, but I'm not sure kind of that they all intersect at this point. But this was this really strange period where, so for sure, right? I was single, um, working on different startup ideas or whatever, but hadn't really committed to anything. Started working on a startup idea with the same person that we built the company that we sold to IXL with, and I was traveling down to St. Petersburg a lot. But anyway, long story short, during this window of time, my mom, she had lost her job, and she was struggling. My father had died while I was at IXL when I was 27, and my mom had lost her job, and she was struggling. They were divorced, and whatever. So there weren't many assets, and she was struggling. And I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was just like all my other friends that got laid off, in that sort of 2001, 2002 period.
Right.
And I was trying to help her, and I went one weekend to visit her, and I walked in my house, and that was like the party ending. That was like the hey, I've been successful, I made whatever. Everything. Reality just came rushing back, and I walk in this house, and it's a mess. There's animals everywhere, and I just knew something. It was dark. I just knew something was wrong, and I couldn't even recognize this house I'd grown up in. And anyway, I didn't know it at the time, but my mom had Alzheimer's, but that was the beginning of discovering she had Alzheimer's. Things were,
She didn't know she had Alzheimer's either.
She did not know she had Alzheimer's.
Okay.
In fact, I remember getting super mad about the state of the house, and she couldn't afford power, so there was no power, and she had this kerosene heater in the middle of her den that she would heat and cook her food on top of, and I just was like, "You're going to burn the house down." And I was just so mad. And I remember saying something to her that obviously, once I understood she had Alzheimer's, I will always carry as regret. But in the heat of the moment, I was so mad. And we were growing up. There was this lady down the street, and we used to refer to her as the crazy lady down the street. So I remember telling my mom, I said, "Mom, you are now the crazy lady down the street. Like what is going on?" And again, I just thought it was economic. I just thought she was down and out, right? Didn't have money and depressed and making tough decisions. But she had, every time visited, trying to help her, there would be more animals in the house. And it just like, she had these 12 giant parrots. It was bizarre. I can't even describe how bizarre it was, but it was clear something was wrong. And so fast forward, by this point I'd met my now wife, Stephanie, but we were just dating.
Did you meet her when you came back to Atlanta, or you knew her before?
No, I met her during this period when my mom had Alzheimer's, and boy, there's so much packed into this. I don't remember exact order this all happened, but so during this time I got overwhelmed, and I was so stressed out, and I I had actually got, Greg Foster had invited me to the High Tech Prayer Breakfast. I went to this prayer breakfast, High Tech Ministries prayer breakfast. I go to this prayer breakfast. I was like, all right. I heard all these amazing stories, and they talked about this thing they had called Bliss Through the Bible, where you go and show up. Charlie, was going to walk us through the Bible in 2 hours. So I show up at this thing, and it was right in the middle of when I'd started to go to church. I was really sort of seeking something, and I didn't know what it was, but my aunt, who was the strongest lady I knew, was just on fire for Jesus and devout Christian. And so I was kind of trying to say that I need that in my life. So anyway, I had started down this path of trying to understand, God and what did I really believe. I, thought of myself as Christian growing up, but I dove into all this. So all this stuff was happening at once. And I wound up moving my mom to Atlanta to be able to take care of her because her house was getting foreclosed on. And so we had to go get her out, brought her to Atlanta. And during this window of time, Stephanie and I wound up getting married. And so brought her to Atlanta. And then being with her full time, right away, we knew something was wrong. She couldn't hold the simplest of retail jobs. We got complaints from the neighbors, all this kind of stuff. So took her to a doctor, and that's when she got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so she was young. It's, they call it early onset Alzheimer's if you get diagnosed in your 50s. And so all this is happening at once. I'm just trying to reconcile what I'm going to do next. I sort of didn't realize it, but I had, over that 2-year period, I didn't make a conscious decision, but I'd become my mom's caregiver. That really started this period of my life where I look back now and it's a blur. I mean, I was just juggling so much, and, I did I just kind of kept building. One of my I can't remember if he introduced me to it, but one of my neighbors was Gardner Gerard, Total Technology Ventures here in town, or TTV Capital now here in town. And they had a company that was in trouble. And I can't remember if he or someone else had introduced me to the company, but Jim Balcom was a chairman and, recruited me in to join it. I started out as CEO, but wound up running that company and helping turn that around. So I was just, I felt like I was just fixing things. I mean, I was really just like bailing water and fixing things. The company, my mom, meanwhile, by this point, right, Stephanie and I are married. We had our first child.
So you and Stephanie are married. You and Stephanie are married, and your mother's living with you.
No, we got an apartment, and then when she got to where she couldn't live, we actually moved her into an assisted living facility. Okay. That was at the doctor's request. That if you have a young child at home, they generally don't encourage you to have someone with Alzheimer's there. So we had to move her into assisted living, which, that's not fun and that's painful. And so every day after work, it was, do I go home and spend time with my daughter before she goes to sleep, or do I go to the nursing home? It was an exhausting period for me. And so that next 8 years wound up running and doing two turnarounds.
That must have been kind of tough for Stephanie too, I would imagine. I mean,
yeah,
being young married like that, I mean, you newlyweds.
Amazing. Totally not what she signed up for, right? It was like everything she saw as we were dating changed, like the day we decided we're going to get married. It was, she really was amazing too. I mean, she jumped in, both feet she lived it, same as I did. And she was amazing, but yeah, it was definitely not what we thought when we left for our honeymoon.
Yeah, but it's interesting that a marriage like that is going to go one of two ways, right? It's either going to be like, this isn't what I signed up for, or you find that you actually grow closer so much more quickly than you ever would have. Because you realize that you're really one flesh. You've been thrown together so quickly like that, and you stuck together. That's just an incredible. At one side, you could look at it and say it's awful. The other side, you could say it's such a great gift.
Yeah, I think it's right. I think it's the latter for us, and I think it was even more than that. Her, at this point, right, my father was deceased, and I was essentially losing my mom. I'd already lost her as my mom, right? We'd switched roles, but her parents really just brought me into the family as well. And
oh, that's
so
great.
And so I had and my aunt who had sort of took over as filled the spot. My mom's sister kind of filled the spot that my mom was leaving, and my aunt was an amazing woman. She had her own amazing story. My uncle, her husband, had committed suicide, and her only son died of AIDS back when that was super controversial. And so I just saw how strong she was, and she was just amazing. So anyway, I had all these people around me that kept me, above water. But it was an exhausting 8-year stretch. But during that period, I thought of myself as someone who built things. And so I was building these companies.
Before we get to that, though, you made some comment. This is a very difficult period. And you said you started like going to church and you started. Why did all of that sort of come into play? This is before you were married even. Like, why did all that sort of come? Because you lived a pretty successful life. I mean, everything was up for you. Everything worked for you. Okay. Even when you left that IXL, it still worked for you.
Well, what you just said is exactly it. All of a sudden, like everything, I told you the story and you kept saying, why do these things happen? And I said, I don't know. Right. But I didn't actually have to make too many decisions along the way. Right. They just the decisions, happened to me. And then all of a sudden, I had gone from this peak of just excitement and passion for what I was doing to, playing golf with Kevin, talking about what we were going to do next and not having any idea what the answer was, right? And
then at the beginning of each round saying, let's remember now, we're both very successful guys. I don't know why we're here right now, but we were very successful guys, right?
Yeah. And so, obviously I know what was happening now, where I am, in my faith and walk now. But at the time I couldn't have answered that. I just knew that there was something missing. And I just, and I saw the strength that my aunt had. And like, if I ever called her and asked her the question, like if you were having this podcast with her and you asked the question you asked me 100 times so far, like, why does this keep happening? My aunt would have looked at you and just said, it's Jesus. Right. And so I saw that. And she, whenever I sort of leaned on her for help, that was her answer to me. Right. This is what you need in your life. And so I was listening, and I was curious, and I recognized that I didn't really know exactly what I believed. I just sort of believed I was Christian, just like I believed I grew up in Jamestown and was born in Winston-Salem, right? So it was more like seeking something, and I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that, I was seeking. And what was amazing is that even that journey, it's incredible the people that came into my life while I was on that journey, right? And like I say, you fast forward today and you look back and you go, oh, of course, these are all the ingredients that added up to where I am today.
You said Greg Foster invited you to the prayer breakfast, okay?
Yeah, so Greg and I were
how did you get was Greg part of this IXL team?
Yeah.
And he's a Georgia Tech grad, okay?
Yeah, and he's a Georgia Tech grad, and we were friends, and he's just a great guy. And he was the first one to invite me to prayer breakfast. And the very next year, I think the second person invited me was Kenji, right now Acuity. But anyway, it was one of those things that makes you go, I don't know if that's what I believe or not. And you dive in. And I just remember, I remember going to that Bliss of the Bible, which, I can laugh now, but the honest truth was, I'd been going to church and I didn't really understand what anybody was talking about. And I went to this Bliss of the Bible thinking kind of like Cliff Notes here. If I can go for an hour or two and catch up, maybe I'll figure out what I want to know. And I just remember leaving with this. I still wouldn't say I was caught up, but I understood the story and I understood what I had to decide if I believed, and I understood what I had to go figure out. And that started I was a slow learner. So that started a couple year process. That a lot of amazing people helped me along that journey. And in fact, the kind of sort of pivotal time for me was I went on a fishing trip with my father-in-law, and I was on this fishing trip. And by this point I was running an ATDC and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And he said, I was complaining about not knowing, what I was going to do next. And I think I made just kind of an offhanded quip and said something like, I wish, God would hurry up and lead me to my next thing. And he and his friend that he brought on this fishing trip, huge guy, looked at me and they said, that's not how it works, Blake. Right. It's not, it's not what you want. Right. And you need to be quiet, listen, and figure out what he wants for you. And anyway, I don't know what it was about that exact moment, but suddenly everything I'd been trying to figure out as an engineer, read and put logic to and study, it kind of clicked for me. And then Stephanie and I started thinking like that and incorporating that more into our decisions. And so anyway, all this happened at once. And right about this time, so shortly after that, my mom died while I was
how
right
long
before.
Was it from the time you walked in and saw her in your old house with the kerosene lamp in the middle of the floor to when she passed away?
It was about a little over 6 years.
So 6 years you took care of your mom.
Yep. And that was
what a strain, man.
I looked back, but I realized that was my entire identity. And, everything else I was doing in my life wouldn't have thought of it that way then, but even my friends, I realized, had started to view me through this lens of, can I help? And, oh my gosh. And, you're a good son or whatever. So even my friends had started
your profession became caregiver to your mom.
Yeah. I think I was a caregiver as much as I was anything else. Now I was still doing building. And
how old were you? How old were you from when to when? From like 30 to 36 or?
I was like, obviously it started before that, but I guess I was like 33 to 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are prime times too. That's prime time career stuff.
Yeah. Now I was still doing well career-wise. I do think it kept me from thinking. I think it kept me from questioning myself about what I was doing because, you're just spinning plates. But the company that,
like from a career-wise, you were more of a fireman. In other words, I'm a business operator and, where's the fire? Let me go kind of help and put it out. But, this is what I really have this second gig that I'm doing that's really more important to me.
Yeah. And that's what led me to ATDC. So after we sold the second company, I realized that if someone is asking you to come be a CEO of an existing company, they didn't decide they wanted a different CEO because everything was perfect and they wanted to see if they could make it more perfect. So
I love that. That's it. It's like, I remember that lesson when I heard it is, why do you think we hired you? It wasn't,
So it was a little bit of a light bulb. And so after we sold the second company, it was right when my mom passed away and my second child, Luke, was born.
Yeah.
And so I committed to Stephanie that I was going to take some time off before I jumped into something. And it was then that ATDC, they have a program called Entrepreneur in Residence. I didn't know what that meant. I remember telling Stephanie, I think Georgia Tech offered me a job, but I don't think they're going to pay me. You know that story. And so anyway, but it was an office I could go to and it was a place while I recuperated and it didn't have high expectations on me and all that. So I jumped in as an EIR. Shortly after I got there, the woman, Nina, that was running it left. And they asked me to, lead the search committee to find somebody and kind of run it on an interim basis till we found a general manager. And so it was stepping into ATDC was kind of like what I described stepping into Ixl. All of a sudden I was surrounded by these people thinking big, creating, trying to figure out how to do these things that were, audacious and ambitious. And it connected me to the startup community. Even though I was running these startups, I wasn't really part of the startup community. I guess because at night I went home and, with the family stuff. But anyway, it pulled me into the startup community. And I think it was just that moment in time. This was kind of 2011, 12. If you think back to who was at ATDC then, it was, Bird Blitch, right, and Patient Co. It was, Tim Sheehan was an EIR, right? Dan Shapiro was an EIR. Brooks Robinson was an EIR and then started Springbot. Kyle Porter was starting SalesLoft. It was a really amazing time to be surrounded, just working with the best people. Greg Foster was there doing Bright Whistle. It was just, I couldn't have been more lucky to be there then. And it really relit this fire in me for entrepreneurship. And so I really thought, okay, this is great. I've got this buzz card, which I thought was going to be a key to the secret closet where I could go dig through the IP and, find something to start a new company. But the more I was doing it, I saw this momentum. I knew that this was, I'd seen the same activity in Boston when I was with Ixl. I'd seen corporate partners come together. I had seen, startups come together, and university, it was right by, our office was right by MIT. So everything I saw in Kendall Square, I saw happening here in Atlanta. And, at Ixl, I was working with people like you and other angel investors. Sorry, Georgia Tech's sounding an alarm. But we, I just saw that this was a time and that this was a special kind of pivotal moment where we had this critical mass of talent focused on entrepreneurship. It was the tail end of, the sort of Great Recession.
I know that they offered you the job as general manager full time. Why
Yeah.
was that of no? Why was that? Why did you always insist on I'm the interim general manager?
So during this time off, all these questions you're asking, if we had told the story backwards, I would have answered them different. And so one of the things by this point I had realized was that I think what I loved about ATDC was I felt like I was making a difference. I felt like I was actually serving these entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, my experiences, my network, all that was adding some value. And so that lit me up. The second thing I realized, though, was I still needed a scoreboard. I was still competitive. I still needed to build something. I was still an engineer. And so I knew that, running ATDC wasn't my last stop, right? It's sort of like, that's the dream job you want, later. But I still had something else to build. And I thought it was going to be find another company to build. But as I started working on this, I started to see this gap between the opportunity, the capital available. I became fascinated by what, you, other investors in town, SIG were doing. And started to think about, this is the right time, right? There is no entrepreneur's first choice for early stage capital firm really here in Atlanta. That's something worth building. I wonder if I could do that. And I went out and started talking to people a little bit about it. And I told people, I wonder if I can do that. And almost everybody said, no, you can't. And they told me all the reasons why, that was hard to do in Atlanta. And I but I couldn't let go of it. And then you played a big role in this because you were one of the first people that said, hey, you'd be great at that. And so you kept that little spark alive. And I kept thinking about it more and more and decided
I didn't know that all the other people you talked to said, no, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, that there's not enough activity here. Too hard to raise capital. You can't make money. Seed investing. Lots of reasons why.
What was interesting about venture capital to you? Becoming a venture capitalist. Why couldn't you let go of the idea?
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, at some point has the idea, but they generally let go of it pretty quickly. You didn't let go of it, so that was something that stuck to you. That's good.
Yeah. I had thought about it earlier in life, and I did let go of it because people kept saying, hey, you won't be happy unless you're the operator. And, you're not going to enjoy being in the back seat. So I had that little nagging question, but I think the reason I didn't let go of it was, part of all that experience I went through, I had realized like I have to do something with meaning, right? I have to be building something that's worth building, that's hard to build, and I remember when I told Stephanie what I was going to do, because this was a very different plan than she thought I was on. And I remember telling her, hey, this is perfect for me, right? I can love and serve others, and I can still put points on the scoreboard for our family, right? This is great. And I really do think that was the mix. I felt like I found something where I could help other people achieve their dreams. I felt like I could make an impact and add value. I recognized that I had this special 2 years at ATDC, where all of a sudden, I kind of found myself at the center of a lot of that activity and had the relationships. And then I just had this gut feeling that now was the time in Atlanta, and that, this would be a good time to do it.
So then what? That's, so you get this idea. It's like, okay, so you're standing there flat-footed with a big idea. What do you do with it?
Well, while I was thinking about doing it, I met through, when you're running ATDC, you give people tours and whatever, you spend a lot of time with alumni at Tech and all this kind of stuff. And there was a guy who was doing some work with Georgia Tech, and I got introduced to him kind of to give him a tour about the entrepreneurial activity. And I told him what I was going to be doing. And he said that he had some friends and they'd be interested in investing. And so that kind of gave me the courage to, even though I didn't really have a plan yet, I said, well, I'm going to raise a fund. Do you want to invest? And he said, yeah, I'll look at it. And so I think that was kind of the tipping point, was somebody was willing to say yes. And I said I was doing it. So I had to go figure out what that meant. And in case he did say yes. And so anyway, those three guys came together and became, what was the first fund.
And that's all it was three guys. So this is very limited partners.
Yeah. Three, to be fair, it was three family offices, right?
Okay.
The rest of their family members probably would not like me to describe as three individuals, but it was three big family offices. And so I launched what was really a small angel fund, if you think about it in context of today. And so we got started with this small fund. The first deal I did was Pointivo. So that was Dan Chaperi, who I'd worked with as an EIR at ATDC, and some technology that I had actually thought about starting a company around myself. I'd met this PhD student. So we decided to put that company together, and that was my first investment, and was kind of off to the races. And so started building TSV, and I called it Tech Square Ventures, even though it was this teeny tiny angel-like fund writing small checks. I gave it this big name because I knew I wanted to try to plant the seeds to build a venture firm. And so that was the launch of Tech Square Ventures. Certainly wouldn't have imagined, 6.5 years later that we'd be here with.
Well, when you were doing this, when you were starting to get into this, like, you don't know how to put together a venture capital firm. You don't know what's involved. So you get these guys that said, well, if you do put something together, I'll look at it. So now you feel like, okay. So how did you go about that? Who did you seek advice from? Or did you just go to lawyers and pay them? Or what did you do?
I sought advice from everybody, but 99% of the credit for that phase of this journey goes to Alan Tatel. So everybody I went to gave me good advice.
So Alan was at one point the managing partner of Norrell Mosley here, a big fund in town. Right.
That's right. And if you know Alan, he's a kind of a no-nonsense guy, right? So when I reached out for advice from him, he said, well, call Karen, his assistant, and schedule 3 meetings. I said, 3, yeah. And Alan put so much thought into this, and he didn't just get together with me and brainstorm or just shoot from the hip. He had really thought out. It was almost like he gave me a course. Huh. And he showed me things that, were probably proprietary, right, to Norrell Mosley. I mean, he just did everything he could to help me. And he told me what I needed to know, told me at least enough that I didn't make a fool of myself and trying to pull it together. I managed to keep everybody together. But he really gave me this sort of crash course. And I don't know that I would have made it. I mean, I think your question is a great one. I don't know that I would have been able to pull it together if he hadn't have sat me down and said, this is what it means. This is what it looks like. This is what you need to do. This is what things you have to decide for yourself. This is what you need to worry about. And he kind of gave me this crash course. And like I said, it was
Why did he do that?
Goldbergs and Starbucks classes.
Why did he do that?
I think Alan, 2 reasons.
I got to say this about Alan. Alan is somebody that I greatly admire. He has always been someone who invests in the community. He's one of those players. And there's not a lot of players like that, but he's one of them. But it's interesting that, did you have a great relationship with him? Was there something from Georgia Tech that you had? Or, I mean, I think it's commitment for him to then build somebody who's another venture competitor, right? Another venture capitalist in town. And I realize that it's more fraternal venture capital, but to sit aside and say, yeah, I'm going to really pour myself into this guy and give it this thought. So we have this course I put together for this young man.
So there's 3 reasons. There's 3 reasons, I think. So number 1, when I first decided to do this, by the way, I skipped something that the story sounds better when I skip this part, but I'll share the honest version of it. Part of deciding to do this is I actually went around and tried to find a job doing it. I tried to join another firm already doing it. I started one because nobody would, hire me, and I'll tease Alan to this day. He was one of them. It wasn't they wouldn't. They didn't have a spot. But anyway, so I'm joking.
Why do you think that nobody wanted to hire you?
I don't know. I wouldn't say they didn't want to, because
Well,
there
they
were there,
didn't.
there I did I shouldn't say nobody, because I did get an offer to join a firm, but it was outside of Atlanta, and I didn't want to
Okay.
leave Atlanta. Um, and the two firms that I sort of pursued here in town, um, I only knew two at that time, really. Uh, One of them, I think I was a finalist, but I think they chose someone else. And then, at the time, Norm Mosley, they weren't, they hire people when you raise new funds. They were just in between. Um, I think it was not that no one wanted to hire me. I think it was lack of opportunities. And to be fair, I didn't have a lot of background doing this. I didn't have any background doing this.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, that's part of it. You have to be just the right fit,
Yeah.
at the right time. It's very difficult to kind of step into a venture capital firm. Sometimes they want operators, sometimes they want pure finance guys, like,
Yeah. I
do you
like
have
to
the right
think,
industry expertise? Do you have, I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered that makes you the right fit.
yeah, I like to think I'd have better luck now. But the the second was, look, I think the community appreciated the time, the time that I was at ATDC. I was interim for a reason. ATDC went through a transition and a change, and there was a lot to be figured out. And so I think there was a fair amount of goodwill, just generated in the community for having pulled together some of those things during that period of time. And to your point, Alan, later, this was later, but when I was chairman of Venture Atlanta, one of the things the chairman gets to do is pick the next chairman. And I wanted Alan Tatel to be the chairman. And when I called him to ask him to be the chairman at the time, this was, I don't remember what year this was, maybe 2016 or something. I called him and I said, Alan, will you be chairman? And I said, and by the way, you have to do this, right? We're trying to make this into a world-class venture conference, and you're the only person in town that knows what that means. And he laughed and said, well, that's a good ask. But seriously, it was, I just respected him. And I think the combination of, I said no to him, and we have, and he did a lot of work at ATDC, but mostly I think it was just who Alan is. I think he recognized the broader context of, things like this need to happen. He recognized his role as being one of the few people of tenure in the space in town, that actually at that point, could say they were a VC and, had experience.
I think, and he came from being, he was with Mindspring way back
MySpring, yeah.
when, right?
So he started he started from being an operator.
Exactly right, and I think that there's this piece, and where he was getting to the age where he's saying, we need this next generation.
Yeah,
we need to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So I think it's wonderful what he did.
And I love telling the story just because it was even just the way he helped. So there was the heart and the spirit for doing it, but it was also just that he took it so seriously and he was so intentional about it, and he did it. So anyway, Alan really educated me on all the stuff that I otherwise probably would have looked extremely foolish, saying I was going to start a fund, but not actually having done any of the things I needed to do that. And so he was probably my primary coach through that phase. And then obviously wound up, Michael Hollingsworth here in town and Nelson Mullins were super helpful.
How difficult was it to take people from, hey, yeah, I'll take a look at it, I'm interested, to let me sign as a limited partner? How difficult was that?
For the first one,
now that you're raising another fund here, I'm saying look it back. So you got a comparison here a little bit.
It was tough because I thought they said yes when they said yes, and what I didn't know is that these family offices have their own lawyers and whatever. I didn't know I had to go sell it twice, right? So from the time they said yes to the time we signed the documents was pretty long, and it was painful. So it was hard, but it was a small enough amount of money that I don't think people viewed it like you view it. Like, we're raising this fund now, and I think people view it as, make a decision to invest in a fund, and they view it from a standpoint of having alternatives.
Yeah.
This was small and easy, and I think people knew I had unique access to the entrepreneurs, and they were willing to take a chance with what was not a meaningful for them amount of money.
Well, I know that you impressed them, the fact that you knew everybody walking around Georgia Tech, okay, and that you were selected to give them this sort of tour. But but it really was almost like creating this mini family office here, this little personally personal mutual fund,
Yeah.
if you will, right? In Atlanta, headed by our guy. It was almost
And they've been working
proprietary in
with Georgia
nature.
Tech. Yeah, they had been working with Georgia Tech. So, people like Wayne Hodges and, they knew other folks, the Tufts folks here in town. And, those guys really said good things, and it kind of happened. So honestly, that was back to luck, right? I don't know how to tell someone to replicate that.
So I mean, again, I think that it's sort of like you're guided, right? It's sort of happening. These things just sort of happen to you, which is great. But then you were a venture capitalist, and now you had to invest. So the first one was easy because it was something that you were thinking you were going to do yourself, okay? Meaning you were going to run this company with this Georgia Tech PhD, and he had some pretty cool technology with Pointivo. How did you know what to invest in? How did you early on like that? How did you come to those decisions as to here's sort of a profile? Because you're coming out of the ground. You haven't been doing investing. You were never even an angel investor, right?
I got to tell you, boy, am I fortunate that because I could be sitting in a very different place today based on what I actually knew and what I actually started out looking for, which was absolutely the wrong way to do it. But I'm so fortunate that the handful of entrepreneurs I invested in first, and I'll come back to what I learned from this, turned out to be great bets. But I went into this, unfortunately, with way too much operator mindset. And so I was looking for technology. And I was looking at it, everything through the lens of the product. And boy, did I quickly learn that it was all about the people and the market opportunity. And so my first 3 or 4, I was more obsessed with the potential that I thought I could see in the opportunity for that, product or technology. And in fact, I didn't necessarily articulate an investment thesis, but if you had asked me if I had one, I probably would have said it was based on IP and technology and just the things I was used to doing around Georgia Tech. I'd stayed active in Georgia Tech, Alumni Association Board of Trustees, all different kinds of things. So I looked at it through that lens, and then once you have written a few, so the first few checks are actually really easy and really fun because that's all you're doing is meeting entrepreneurs and writing the check. And then once you get to about 4 companies, you've had this other job, which is helping the checks you already wrote succeed, right? And it takes a lot of time. And so in doing that, I started to realize that, what entrepreneurs needed as much as money was access to markets and customers, and that I really needed to build a platform that was good at helping them do that. And I wasn't at first. I said it, but I didn't necessarily know what that meant. I certainly didn't have anything more to offer than maybe I can introduce you to a few people.
So what made you valuable maybe at first to these initial things is that you were a good operator. So you could relate to them very well, and you could help them sort of come out of the ground, if you will. And secondly, you had money. And thirdly, you did have some network. Okay. It wasn't customer network, but it was network, right?
Yeah. And to be
it. And that's what a lot of VCs have. But you're saying they need more. Real value add is if I can introduce them to customers.
Yeah. Okay. And I learned later that it just introducing them to people that's not even the right value add. But to put all this in context again, it's not really replicable today because part of what I had going for me was I had almost zero competition, right? The only other investors in town, it kind of took all of us to invest to get anything done, right? Because we were all writing small checks. And so this wasn't like I was having to convince the entrepreneur that I was better than 10 other people, right? So I think I had a grace period that maybe you wouldn't have entering venture today in this region. But I do think that generally, like I said, I think there was some goodwill and there was some trust behind the things that I said I thought I could help with because of the time I had done at ATDC. I think there are, all these entrepreneurs that we now think of that have built these unicorns. They were kind of in the middle of their journeys by the time I started the fund, and they became kind of my reference clients, right? They were the ones that were able to say, hey, he was helpful and he's a good person and all those things. So a lot of things came together. And then in about 2017 was, again, blessed, but I had started to talk around Georgia Tech about, could we do something to connect, with corporate partners. When I was at ATDC, we had launched that Industry Connect program. So I was trying to think of what that looked like for venture, and just wound up
Who were
getting
you talking to about this?
Just inside the community, inside really the halls here at Synergy and the ATDC.
I can tell you, over my 30 years doing this stuff, that conversation has happened through the early 90s, mid 90s, and it was all different people, but it never had gotten as high as Georgia Tech. Okay.
Yeah, and we had pioneered that Industry Connect program at ATDC, which had started to be pretty successful. So I was trying to think, what does that look like? And so I talked about it enough that I think, that was associated with kind of what people thought of me as trying to build. And then really while I was doing that, I got approached by the CEO of Invesco and then president at the time of Georgia Tech, Bud Peterson, and Marty Flanagan, the CEO of Invesco, had this. Those same conversations had come across his desk, through all the CEO channels. They were talking about what could we do to get connected to the startup ecosystem, what's needed. Everybody from the corporates themselves were talking about innovation to, the economic development groups they were involved in.
You skipped a couple of steps though, but I don't understand. So how do you get connected to Marty Flanagan, the CEO of Invesco, and how are you connected to Bud Peterson at the time was the president of Georgia Tech? I mean, how did all that become part of this conversation?
Yeah. So I knew Bud really well because we had worked on a lot of entrepreneurial stuff together. I'm on the board of GATV here at Georgia Tech, which if you don't know is sort of what, it's what ATDC is part of, and a lot of the economic development type activity and real estate development here in Tech Square. And I was on the board of trustees for the Alumni Association. So I had known Bud from a whole bunch of different Georgia Tech activities. And then, Bud was very aware, active, and interested in ATDC during the time that I was leading ATDC. And if you're leading ATDC, you spend time with those people all the time because they're bringing through every company, they're bringing through every, donor, alumni, and basically everything that doesn't fit anywhere else in the university. Somehow, people think of ATDC first. So we had spent enough time together. And the other thing about Bud is we had done back when he had asked a great question. What year was this? Probably, I don't know, 2014 or so. He had asked a great question, which is, what's Georgia Tech's role in this rise of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, in Atlanta and Georgia? And so he pulled in McKinsey to do kind of a study to say, what is Georgia Tech's role in the middle of all this? And I was on that committee they put together. And so anyway, but at this point, through just Georgia Tech stuff, through knowing Bud through Georgia Tech, and then through all the stuff we had done thinking about entrepreneurship, I knew him. And so when a lot of people talk about the origins of Engage, but the real story was lots of people, like you said, for years have been talking about connecting things. Marty Flanagan, the CEO of Invesco, kind of, took it a step farther and said, I want to figure this out. Prior to being CEO of Invesco, he was he had lived in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, really, but he had enough sort of insight into what an ecosystem looked like. And he was chairman of Atlanta Committee for Progress. And so he started to recognize all these conversations that were colliding. And he kind of sat down with Bud Peterson and said, we should do something. And the two of them, probably at Bud's suggestion, said, we should call Blake. Let's talk about what we can do. And it was really the three of us. It was a startup. I mean, we got together and we whiteboarded and PowerPointed it, through ideas and iterations. We went out and did customer discovery, went out and talked to the other CEOs. And
well, knowing those two other guys, I'm sure they whiteboarded it with you and then you PowerPointed it.
Yeah, that's probably fair iteration. But you'd be surprised at how much. I think we were a great combination. We were going to go out to these CEOs and say, we can do this, and this is what we should do. And the big companies cared about their innovation roadmaps, right? And so we were able to go out and say, we were able to go out and say, we're going to launch this program that's going to help startups connect with you. And we're going to work with Georgia Tech to make sure we understand your innovation needs. And we're going to line up startups against those innovation needs. We're going to put them through an accelerator boot camp to get them ready for enterprise sales. And then we're going to connect you. And so if you think about going out and talking to CEOs of some of the world's largest and most successful companies and telling that story, if you think about what they have to believe, and then they say, okay, if Bud Peterson, the president of Georgia Tech, who we're already trying to do all sorts of innovation stuff with, tells me this is a good idea for innovation, I believe him. And then they say, well, I'm not really sure about what all that stuff about accelerator and fund means, but if the Marty Flanagan, CEO of one of the largest asset management firms and fund firms in the world, tells me this is a good idea, I believe him. And then I don't really know about this startup community, but Blake seems to be connected and know who these startups are. So I think part of it was just this fortune that the three of us were the ones that took the conversation to the next level.
So you were the right three people in the right place, and you had the right credibility, right? With these,
and there had been false starts before that. But anyway, we went out and did customer discovery. We just went and talked to the companies. Everybody lit up. Everybody said, that's exactly what we're trying to do. They said three things. We care about connecting with the startups that are impacting our industry. We care about changing our culture or building entrepreneurial muscle. And we care about Atlanta being a leading tech hub. And, I think we set out to get 10 companies. I think we talked to 12. All of them said yes. One of them wound up not going forward, but so 11 of the 12. I mean, that's, we just got it right.
Pretty good hit rate.
Yeah, it was amazing. And
who actually did the pitch and the close?
Oh, all three of us.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We actually had to show up, all three of us, to most of them. Sometimes it was only one or two of us.
What do you think? What do you think about? What do you think that these companies that were investing in this, they basically became like limited partners almost in a venture firm.
Yeah.
Right? But it was,
and they didn't necessarily know what that meant. They all knew each other and worked together, and this became kind of a project for Atlanta Committee for Progress too. And so, between all these different entities talking about how do we do this, we kind of had the way paved, because I think what we did that no one else did before was we gave them something they could say yes to. We said, we want you to do this, and here's how it meets the three things you just told us. And so I think they understood that they were joining a fund and a limited partnership, but I think they only mostly understood it because their lawyers told them that. I think what they really were agreeing to do was to join kind of a club together and to figure this out. They valued the cross-corporate learning. They valued doing it together. They believed us that this was the right structure of the program. And I think our own naivety is the wrong word, our own not being surrounded, not being in, say, New York or Silicon Valley, instead of just copying what somebody else was doing, we started with the problem set and said, this is what would work. This is what works for everybody involved. And so we came up with a really unique structure. And that was why I think we had the, audacity to say, not only do we want you to put this capital in the fund, we want you, the CEO, to serve on a board for us. And we want you to dedicate team members inside your company to act as our advisors.
Which is a huge ask.
An enormous ask, right? An enormous ask.
Money is one thing. Money is a check. That's an easy one. But the time, that's a very difficult ask.
But ironically, that's why they said yes. They said, yeah, that's what we want, right?
What if they expected there was these three big criteria that you talked about that you met, which is why they ultimately did the deal, plus a fact that you three guys were involved, all right, that were leading it, if you will. What did they get that they didn't expect?
cross corporate learning.
When you're talking about big companies, they say innovation, and when we think about little companies, we think innovation, right? Because you have to be innovative, or you don't get out of the block. We're talking two different languages or definitions of what that means.
I think going in,
they didn't expect.
I think going in, they hoped, and I think we're exceeding their expectations that they could. I'll get to the exact answer, but that they could connect with startups that mattered for their company, that they would help change their entrepreneurial culture. In other words, expose their internal people to risk and get them more comfortable working with it. And I think they hoped they would make an impact on Atlanta. I think what they were surprised at, and now they would put this as, if you went and did customer discovery today, they would probably put this at the top of their list, is I think what they learned to value really quickly was the cross-corporate learning. We all knew Georgia Tech would give us some amazing insights. We all knew we could impact the startups. We all knew we'd eventually figure out how to put together a good program. And we knew we could find some great entrepreneurs. I think what everybody was surprised at is the insights they're getting from each other, the different corporate partners by doing this together. Our process, we work together with these corporate partners to understand their innovation needs. We have working groups around themes where they all hear what each different company is looking for, the strategic focus areas, as we call it. And I think that the cross-corporate learning has probably become, the most important thing we can deliver again.
How has this changed the views of what innovation and innovation is for those CEOs? Okay. Because that's going to have impact down through their organization, right? So how has it changed their views, having worked with you guys? How long has this been now with Engage? Is this 4 years?
Yeah, we're in our 4th year, so we're getting ready to start our 8th cohort. We think of it, we do 2 cohorts a year, so we're getting ready to launch our 8th cohort.
A lot of cohorts, baby. That's moving.
A lot of cohorts. So, look, I think before I answer that, I want to make sure and say one thing: is these people run some of the most successful companies in the world for a reason. These are some of the smartest people in the world. And so I think that a lot of them went into this fully aware of what they thought innovation was and what it meant to be. I think they fully understood, they saw that, hey, the average age of a company on the S&P 500 is less than 20 years now. That didn't used to be the case. They've seen these companies come and disrupt their industries. They've seen the problem. They've all become technology companies to some extent. So I think they actually had a pretty good idea of what innovation was. I think what they were wrestling with, when you have these large organizations, they were wrestling with, how do we accelerate it in our companies? And I think they understood that a big part of that, what no one had sort of tried to deliver for them before, was kind of that helping them change the culture and that entrepreneurial. So we went in with this thing that felt a little bit like pickup basketball for innovation. They had plenty of a lot smarter people, McKinsey's of the world, fully prepared to help them solve their innovation problems much better, certainly, than we could on day one. But I think they recognized from day one the value of this idea of doing it together in this pickup basketball game. But look, I think what they would say now is that it's what we already knew. It's all about people. And so I think it's about changing their culture. And then I think they have just lit up at this opportunity to empower these entrepreneurs, and they're kind of amazed at what they can get out of it. So, before they just viewed them as small companies. They didn't understand they had to create different, or maybe they understood, but they didn't know how to execute on creating a different path for a startup. That they weren't going to be successful if they had to go through the 14 hoops and then procurement and legal and everything else. So I think it just became a code. Engage really just became a code word that inside the companies, everybody heard it so much that it was like it de-risked the activity. So I'll tell you one quick story. I won't say the company because I don't know if they'd like me to share it, but we had a CEO call us. We had an executive call us at one of the companies and say, listen, just so you know.
This is one of the big companies?
Yeah, this is one of the big companies. Just so you know, there's a business unit saying they're working with a startup as part of your program, part of Engage. That's not really an Engage company. And so we kind of panicked and said, wow, we're going to get in trouble for this and it's going to fail or something. We're going to get in trouble. So anyway, we reached out to
the point you're trying to make there. I missed the setup. Tell me again.
So we learned from one of the big companies that someone inside that company was working with a startup and basically saying, oh, it's an engaged company, so it's okay. Let's just go ahead.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't. And so we were kind of worried about that. And so we reached out to our quarterback and that CEO, and the answer we got back was good. It's working, right? So in other words, they recognized right away, if our team needs an excuse to try something, that's fine. You can be the excuse, right? And so it was a pretty cool answer. But so my main point here is I don't know that we changed their view of what innovation was. I think we're just created a better tool for them to go after it.
I think it's really cool that you gave them an environment where they can all meet together and talk about innovation in their companies and learn from each other. I mean, that cross learning on Fortune 100, I mean, that's got to be near impossible. You know, at the CEO level, they might have their teams together and all that, but I mean, that's
and Georgia Tech and Daly and Nami and Tiago, they deserve a lot of credit for that because they helped design. All the program really is, when you design a program, you're trying to decide what set of activities can you do and make it scalable that will create this result. So we've iterated and experimented. We've had over 80 contracts to date between our startups and our big companies. And it's just been amazing.
How has this Engage benefited Tech Square Ventures?
Yeah, well, based on
last we talked just a few minutes ago was we were just sort of this little angel fund. What's happened, and how does Engage play into that? Okay.
Yeah, so we're a little angel fund, right? That's a fund that's pure greed fund, right? Investing for capital appreciation. And then we had this strategic program, Engage, that we were partnered with all these corporate partners and Georgia Tech on. And I realized finally, hey, we actually now have this platform I was trying to build. We have the platform for access to capital, and we have the platform for access to customers and markets. And so as we went to launch Fund 2 for Tech Square Ventures, what doing Engage did was helped make the vision much more real. It gave us a much more concrete, tangible evidence of the network and ability to help. And it was it's almost like we have two products. We have one product for strategic investing. It's not about, making the most money for that fund. It's about making the most impact on their innovation needs. So that's why only corporate partners can invest in that. And it supports this accelerator program. And then we have, our fund for capital appreciation. So I think it helped us develop and crisp up.
But does Tech Square Ventures run Engage?
Yeah. So think of Engage as like our program, but it's Engage itself is more like a joint venture between all of us. So to answer your question very specifically, Tech Square Ventures is the sole managing general partner of the fund. So we run the fund, and then we run Engage Ventures, but Georgia Tech runs the actual program. Okay. That's their role in the partnership. And then we have the board of the CEOs, which, kind of gives direction on what the whole thing needs to come together and look like. So Engage itself, yes, the short answer is yes, we run it. But it's a joint venture. It's a partnership.
That makes sense. Well, you got to have somebody run the partnership. It's sort of like a Marriott property. The property is owned by a lot of individual investors, but it's run by Marriott management, right, if you will.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And our vision is to build the activity on top of the Georgia Tech platform, and so that it's permanent and sustainable. It's the reason we chose a fund, by the way, instead of asking them just to give us money.
On top of the Georgia Tech platform, what is the Georgia Tech platform?
It means I need them and their employees to help us figure out how do you work with a big company to extract their innovation needs. And it means I need you to help me figure out what an 8 to 12 week program looks like that will help entrepreneurs get better at enterprise sales and facilitate connecting them. And so they run the programmatic parts of it. And we made the business model of the fund for two reasons. We wanted the big companies to have skin in the game. We wanted to show them that innovation could be, not a cost center, so that, because we knew this popularity of corporate venture and corporate innovation is going to come and go. So the great thing about, back to the culture, the great thing is that when they write that check, they're stuck with us for 10 years, right? We don't have to go to them every year and say, well, you pay us, your fees to do this program. So we did it all as a structure of a venture fund, which is great because it makes it a sustainable model. If we're successful, they'll keep doing it. It's hard because in the beginning, right, it's hard to run all this off a small amount of fees, but we've now each fund supports 6 cohorts. So we're now onto the second fund supporting the Engage program. So it's the resources are building up. So we're able to do more. But really, if you take a long-term view of what we're trying to do here, and you want to build something that will last, it was the right business model. And fortunately, that's the great thing about having the CEOs engaged. Again, back to what I learned at Georgia Tech, these are people who can think 10, 15 years out, right? And these are people who can make a decision and a bet today.
Right.
On.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been we've been into this thing for a couple hours now. Okay. So I'm going to call it to an end, and I hate to do it, but I tell you, I've just always been amazed at how you've kept how you build relationships and how you keep them vital, and active. And that certainly is the answer to, how you sort of took all of this experience and all of these relations that you had, and you kind of rolled it into Tech Square Ventures and now Engage. And the impact that you're having is just, I think, absolutely incredible.
Well, thank you. I'm not smart enough to intentionally do that. So there's a element of God's hand in that.
There is a God's hand in that. And there is a piece, though, that's really interesting. When I kept saying, what is it? What is it that they see in you? I kept asking that. But I go back to these moments in your life, like when that swimming coach at 12 years old said, hey, Len, you need to kind of join the team, okay? And then, the president of Georgia Tech, even after you give him what might appear as a smart-ass answer from a freshman, right? He invites you to come and have lunch with him, and then he invites you on this.
Yeah.
He saw something in you. And, the Bird Ellis and the Bill Nussey and what they saw in you, what Stephanie saw in you. I look at all of these, what I saw in you, what what's his name? That was the Invesco guy. What's his name? Marty. And what Marty saw in you, and the current president of Georgia Tech, who you didn't have a relationship. It just comes together. There's this consistency in your life that's God given you this favor. I really believe that. It's just incredible.
Well, what I love about what I'm doing now, especially now that we've launched our second Tech Square fund, right, and we're able to invest more meaningful check sizes, and lead these larger deals, is I hope I'm on the other side of that equation more often for the entrepreneurs, right? I hope that we're able to bring that together for them at the right time, and help them, like I said, achieve their dreams and do well for all the people that have literally bet on us, right? Not just seeing something and saying, I'll invite you to a meeting, but people that are literally betting on us succeeding. And so we're taking all these things that we've put together, and we've focused this conversation on me, but I've got this great team around me, and they all have a story just like mine. And so we've taken all those things, added them into one big bucket, and hopefully, we're able to help these entrepreneurs succeed.
I like what you told Stephanie when you're going to get into this venture capital thing. You said, look, I could really help entrepreneurs, succeed. And, we could put points on the board for the family, and
That's
I think if you keep those two priorities in that order, you're always going to do well. And you've always been that man who has you have a heart to serve. You've always been that way. You always look at people first and how you might be able to help them, as you've helped me over the years. So, and I have such great respect for you. So thanks for doing this and spending 2 hours. I know how busy you are, and I'm sorry I took you away from Stephanie and the kids.
It's always fun to spend time with you, Charlie.
All right. Well, let me close this thing out, and then I'll say goodbye to you at the very end here. So thanks for joining me on the Charlie Paparelli Show, and thanks again to Blake for sharing his story. And I hope that you listened to this and took a lot of notes and took a lot away from it. But, if I was to give one piece of advice from leaving this interview, it would be a person that other people feel comfortable betting on, because I certainly think that's the success model that Blake has really relied on, and he didn't even know it was happening, but people just flat out trust him. Thanks for joining us.